So the question before us today is how RT is processing Biden's $100 billion pledge to fund Israel and Ukraine. As you can imagine, they're not going to be very happy with it, but let's listen very carefully to what they had to say. Here's RT.
The United States and our partners across the region are working to build a better future for the Middle East. One where the Middle East is more stable, better connected to its neighbors, more predictable markets, more employment, less raids, less grievances, less war when connected.
There was much anticipation of Biden's remarks in light of world events. And when he spoke to the American public from the Oval Office, as you just heard, he said that the United States is working to bring stability to the Middle East. Well, tell that to all the embassies of the United States across the region that are being burned in protests, all the American flags that are being lit on fire.
Okay, so first, the United States didn't cause this. Second, they were chanting death to Israel and death to the United States in Iran as soon as Hamas did this thing. So that was going to happen anyway. It's not that the U.S. has caused this, and so that's kind of a silly thing to be saying.
You have leaders throughout the region threatening war if the United States escalates its support for Israel.
You mean if the United States supports Israel? So they're saying don't support Israel or we're going to do more of the thing that we've done. Really?
Atrocities, and it doesn't look like stability that the Biden administration's policies in particular in the United States is creating throughout the region. Now, you'll recall that the leader of Jordan, the leader of Egypt, and the leader of the Palestinian Authority pulled out of their planned four-way summit with Biden 24 hours before it was supposed to take place. And at this
Okay, now I'm no big fan of Biden. As you know, I'm a conservative Republican, so he's not my guy. However, he's been bending over backwards trying to work with the Palestinians to provide humanitarian aid, to talk to them, to come to diplomatic solutions, those kind of things. And they're going to thumb their nose at him. That's fine. They can thumb their nose at him, but he didn't cause it. So, okay.
this point, we have Biden in his remarks claiming that somehow piling more and more U.S. weaponry and money not just into Israel, but into Ukraine as well.
Okay, now see how they're tied together? Ukraine and Israel, don't do this because you're just going to make the problem worse. It's the same song, different verse.
Somehow in the long-term interest of the United States. However, we heard from the Russian Foreign Ministry that if you really look at the situation, most Americans are not going to benefit from the Biden administration piling more money into these foreign conflicts.
Of course they're going to say that the world is not going to benefit from the Biden administration putting more money into Ukraine. Of course not. Why would they think that? They want them to stop giving money, which is a good sign that they should give money.
What was said by Biden and what was said also by the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners, including Israel and Ukraine. It's a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations.
They used to call it the struggle for freedom and democracy. Now it turns out it's just a calculation. It has always been.
Which is a fascinating thing for the foreign ministry spokeswoman from Russia to talk about, just a calculation. Remember when this was going to be 3 days or 3 weeks to take Ukraine, right? That was a calculation. That's now on day 600 plus.
Been like that. It's just that the world was deceived, hiding behind values that do not exist for Washington.
No, those values are there. That's why we're supporting it. But there also is a calculation as well. So those two things can go hand in hand.
Wars have traditionally represented a reasonable investment for the United States, since they didn't take place on the American territory, and they did not care about the other people's costs.
Yeah, apply that to Ukraine. The Russians didn't care about the other people's costs as they were protecting their Russians in Ukraine. Really? So let's hear her words in light of what's going on in Ukraine rather than as she's slapping at Washington.
It appears that the United States is now planning to set aside and provide tens of thousands of 155 millimeter artillery shells that were originally intended for Ukraine and send them to Israel. However, it's to note that this is to replace a similar stockpile of artillery shells that was originally sent to Israel and then diverted to Ukraine. And
Okay, so let's talk about that. So that stockpile is in Israel, and they would take U.S. stockpile shells and move them from Israel to Ukraine because it's closer to where it needs to go. Those shells are one of three items that are really competing. I talked about this just yesterday in my 3 big things, so you can go back to that video. It's those shells, it's small bombs, and Stinger missiles are 3 munitions that are competing between Israel and Ukraine. Most other things are not, but again, this is replenishing that stockpile that was already there.
it's worth noting that Biden's call now for $100 billion more of additional funds has gotten quite a wave of opposition on social media. Here's what Americans had to say.
Okay, so this is like the poor man's man on the street interview. They're not even interviewing people. They're just looking for social media comments that are negative. That's it. How hard is that? Here we go.
To Biden's call for a lot more money.
The United States government is currently $33 trillion in debt, more than any other country on earth. How are we funding Ukraine and Israel with endless borrowed money when we can't even afford a good healthcare system?
Sending Ukraine more money and giving Israel billions, but can't help the poor and working class in one of the worst economies ever.
I don't care about Israel, Ukraine, Russia, Palestine, Iran, or any other place. We have real problems here, and we don't have the power or the resources to.
Now, I don't know if these are made up or not, but whether they are or aren't is irrelevant. Just finding somebody that said a Twitter post that said something that you want them to say doesn't really mean much. So, okay.
To police the world.
Biden sought to convince USA public of the need for $100 billion in funding for Israel, Ukraine, and other countries. Biden appealed to America's national pride. Pity that he didn't commit funding to peace, humanitarian aid, and relief for the millions of people in U.S. in poverty.
Okay, so they're finding things that they want to RT's voice to be amplified here, and that's easy to find. Just find somebody on Twitter saying these things. It would be helpful if they could, provide somebody with an American accent rather than whatever this was. Okay.
While the American working families are being squeezed with even further inflation, we have the president coming on national television to tell them that $100 billion more of their tax money needs to be dumped into 2 ongoing foreign conflicts. It's not.
Of course, doing nothing would make the situation worse by enticing dictators around the world to do even more bad things. And that's primarily the point here, is that whatever they're saying, you can listen to what they say, and then you can go, why are they saying it? And then you understand what they actually hope to achieve. So in what looks like news, they're spreading propaganda. Tell me what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? What are your thoughts as you watch this? Put them in the comments below. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for caring about Ukraine.